That middle window there.
So he's looking in on this side.
Yeah, he was looking right there. His head was just about right up to that black or brown ledge up there.
Wow. That was 108 inches or 9 feet tall.
God, I thought he was awful dang big.
He's awful dang big, yeah.
It's been noted as far back as the late 1950s that Bigfoot tends to bang on logs or do something like that. We call it tree knocking. It's very often deployed to let the other Sasquatches in the area know that something has changed, like maybe somebody's come into an area.
From hunters and hikers to expert investigators and everyday witnesses, these stories span dense Oklahoma forests, isolated islands, chilling roadside sightings, and midnight mountain ridges. Each witness saw something massive, something impossible to ignore. Are these coincidences, misidentifications, or undeniable proof of a hidden giant? Footage courtesy Travel Channel. The forest stretched in every direction, silent and almost otherworldly, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. Its remote isolation made it an ideal refuge for something no one could explain: Bigfoot. Bill Muser, a lifelong island trapper and hunter, knew these woods like the back of his hand. Recently, while tracking a game with his cousin through the dense underbrush, he experienced something that defied logic, an encounter that would stay with him long after the forest fell quiet again.
Everywhere we're looking right here, there is no one out there right now. It's very, very remote. I think that's one of the reasons it's such a good place for something like Bigfoot to live.
The lake lay still under the morning mist, its quiet broken only by the hum of a small motor. They slipped into the boat, eager to explore the hidden corners of the shoreline. Soon, they decided to build a trapper's cabin as their base. But it wasn't long before they realized the woods were far from empty. Something unseen was moving just beyond the trees.
You know, we packed in a small motor and tooled around the lake a little bit and explored.
Then, without warning, a series of heavy bangs echoed from a tree across the clearing, sharp and deliberate. The sounds reverberated through the quiet forest, each strike sending a chill down their spines, as if something unseen and enormous was making its presence known.
We start hearing some banging on a tree across the way.
They tapped lightly on a tree, and almost instantly, it answered with 3 or 4 heavy, deliberate knocks. Each echo bounced through the dense forest, leaving no doubt that this was no ordinary animal. Bill had never encountered anything that could mimic their rhythm with such precision. Something enormous and intelligent was out there in the woods, striking the trees as if signaling or warning they were being watched.
We would pound a little bit and it would pound back at us. 3, maybe 4 good whacks at a time. I don't know any animal that can do anything like that. There was something in the woods whacking the trees.
Bill believed it was Bigfoot, especially given the numerous other sightings reported across the island. The stories and evidence from locals only strengthened his conviction that something extraordinary was moving through these woods.
I believe it was a Bigfoot, especially with all the other sightings that have happened on the island.
Cliff, a well-known cryptologist, had long studied the mysterious behaviors of Bigfoot. He explained that reports dating back to the late 1950s describe a habit called tree knocking, where Sasquatches bang on logs or trees to communicate. It's a warning to others in the area, signaling that something has entered their territory. Bill, recalling the heavy, deliberate knocks he and his cousin had heard, couldn't shake the feeling that they had just been marked by something watching.
It's been noted as far back as the late 1950s that Bigfoot tends to bang on logs or do something like that. We call it tree knocking. It's very often deployed to let the other Sasquatches in the area know that something has changed, like maybe somebody's come into an area.
Cliff noted that gorillas display a similar behavior, clapping their hands to warn others that strangers are nearby. He suggested that Sasquatches might use tree knocking in much the same way, but for humans, these knocks could feel far more menacing, sharp, deliberate, and charged with an almost palpable warning. Bill and his cousin felt the weight of it in the forest, as if whatever was out there was not only aware of them, but sending a clear, threatening message.
Similar behavior has been well documented in gorillas. They clap their hands to warn the other gorillas that, hey, intruders are in the area, you know? I think Sasquatches use this form of communication for something similar, but sometimes those tree knocks can be very threatening.
On several occasions, people venturing into the woods to hunt or gather have suddenly heard the sharp, echoing knocks of trees. The sound seemed to come from nowhere, reverberating through the dense forest and sending an unsettling warning that they were not alone.
To the human. There have been a small number of cases when people have been out of the woods hunting or foraging, and then they hear these knocking noises.
As they moved closer to investigate, a massive figure emerged from the shadows, a Sasquatch. The forest seemed to hold its breath. In that tense silence, the message was unmistakable. Get out. Every instinct screamed at them to retreat, knowing they were in the presence of something powerful, watchful, and utterly unyielding. Were the tree knocks a warning or an invitation to venture deeper into the unknown? Footage courtesy of Flash of Beauty Bigfoot revealed. Dr. Jeff, an anthropologist, anatomist, and biologist with a deep interest in primate evolution, explained that several competing hypotheses exist regarding the true nature of Sasquatch. Approaching the subject from his scientific perspective, he found certain pieces of evidence especially compelling. Evidence that, to him, pointed toward the creature being a large, bipedal primate. The idea of another primate species sharing that same form of locomotion, living alongside humans, offered a rare and intriguing opportunity for comparison and deeper understanding of that adaptation.
There are competing hypotheses about what Sasquatch is, what its nature is, and I've approached this subject from the perspective of an anthropologist, an anatomist, biologist, and so the evidence that impresses me that suggests the existence of this creature points to it being a large bipedal primate. It's particularly interesting to me due to my interest in the evolution of human bipedalism, and sharing that habit with another species of primate living alongside us is a unique and interesting opportunity of comparison and contrast to that adaptation.
What truly captured Dr. Jeff's attention was the footprint evidence. He, like many of his scientific predecessors, Dr. Grover C.R. and Dr. John Napier, found the composite data of these prints hard to ignore. It was, as Dr. Napier once remarked with a mix of curiosity and wonder, undeniable. Something out there was leaving footprints.
It's the footprint evidence that drew me in. And likewise, many of my scientific predecessors, Dr. Grover Krantz, Dr. John Napier, it was the composite data set of the footprints that compelled them to take this matter seriously. Something, as Dr. Napier said, something is leaving footprints.
In mid-October 2020, Bigfoot experiencers Chad and Austin came to the mountain to film a survival video for their YouTube channel. They set up camp on one side of the mountain and, with their camera batteries running low, decided to head down to the water to fish for dinner. For about half an hour, they sat on the rocks, chatting casually with their lines in the water, trying to catch something for the night and stay warm. While they were focused on the task, Austin suddenly noticed a couple of animals perched on a log in the water. He nudged Chad and asked, with a mix of surprise and curiosity, "Hey, what are those?" pointing toward the unusual sight.
We came here to do a survival video for our YouTube channel back in 2020, mid-October. We set a camp up on this side of the mountain. We had turned our cameras off, our batteries were running low. We came down here to fish for some dinner. We spent a good half an hour down here on these rocks, just chit-chatting with the line in the water and
just trying to make ends meet for the night.
Yeah, just trying to get something to eat, trying to get warm, get some food. Austin had noticed a couple animals over here on this log that was in the water, and he kind of punched me in the arm and said, "Hey man, what are those?"
At first, Chad and Austin didn't know what to make of the figures they were seeing. Chad initially brushed it off, thinking it might just be a couple of bear cubs. But the longer he stared, the more he realized that what they were looking at didn't move or shape itself like any bear. Its form seemed almost human, tall, upright, and impossible to ignore. The sheer size of it was shocking, larger than any person Chad had ever seen. And the moment he understood that this wasn't a typical animal of the wilderness, a wave of disbelief washed over him. It felt as if the air was pulled from his lungs. The world went quiet, and all he could hear was the rush of his own thoughts.
We noticed it. I didn't know what to think of it at first. I was thinking maybe a sow and a cub. And I kind of played it off for a few minutes like it's nothing. And the more I looked, the more I seen that it wasn't like a bear. It was more like a, more like a
human.
Man. Yeah, it's so hard to explain. I just can't put it in words.
The size of it was just remarkable. I mean, it's larger than any human I've ever seen. As soon as you realize that it wasn't, some kind of animal that you would normally see out here, it kind of just like took everything out of your body, just took your whole breath away, and everything just went silent. You didn't really hear anything but what your thoughts were.
Bigfoot researcher Diane explained that Bigfoot's intelligence is what makes them so elusive. They are not like herds of elk or pods of whales. They are hominids, aware, thoughtful, and deliberate. They do not want to be seen, and as a result, most sightings are purely accidental. When witnesses report encounters, it is usually a rare and unplanned event.
Bigfoot's intelligent. That's what helps their being elusive. They're not a herd of elk. They're not a pod of whales. They're hominids that are intelligent, and they don't want to be seen. They're not going to be seen. Most instances are accidental when we have witness sightings.
Dr. Jeff explained that the reason Bigfoot has remained unrecognized or unestablished as a species largely comes down to their rarity and unique behavior. They are primarily active at night, tend to roam alone, and cover vast territories while being highly adaptable, traits common to many elusive animal species. These characteristics make them extremely difficult to study, and even more challenging to trap or obtain a specimen in the wild.
That they have remained unrecognized or unestablished as a species simply rests on their rarity and other aspects of their reported behavior. They're nocturnal, they're solitary, they're far-ranging, they're very generalized. Those are characteristics of any animal species that render it very difficult to study, let alone trap or obtain a specimen in the wild.
If Bigfoot has stayed hidden despite compelling evidence and eyewitness accounts, what else might be living just beyond our understanding? Footage courtesy small town monster. Justin SMA, an electrician as well as an avid hunter and fisherman from California, had spent his entire life outdoors. He had never given the Sasquatch topic a second thought. He hadn't heard much about Bigfoot, nor did he realize people considered it a real possibility. But at 24 years old, during a routine hunting trip in a new area of the Sierras with a friend, he experienced something he now believes was a Bigfoot.
I'm Justin Smea. I'm an electrician or a hunter-fisherman from California.
What was your introduction to the Sasquatch topic?
I had been hunting and fishing my whole life. I had never heard anything about Bigfoot. I didn't know that people thought that was a real thing. So when I was 24 years old, and me and my buddy were on a routine hunting trip to a new area in the Sierras, and we encountered what I believe was a Bigfoot.
From the moment they stepped into the mountains, Justin could tell the day was different. The Sierras felt alive, charged almost, as if every ridge and valley was in motion. Deer slipped through the trees in nearly every direction they turned. Elk drifted across distant meadows, and antelope cut swift paths through the brush. It was the peak of the migration, a fleeting window when the wilderness seemed to overflow with life. For Justin and his buddy, it felt like one of those rare golden days hunters talk about for years. Success suddenly seemed inevitable. Opportunities like this came maybe once a year. Hunting often meant long stretches of waiting and empty-handed walks back to camp, but on days like this, Justin sometimes managed to tag a couple of deer, and if fortune truly favored him, even a bear.
So we were on this hunting trip, and it was a really good day. It was one of those days where you're seeing a lot of deer. Everywhere we went, we saw deer, we saw elk, we saw antelope. It was like the peak of the migration. Everything was moving through. And we knew that we were going to get our animal probably. This is something that, you know, happens like maybe once a year where you're actually going to be successful. Like you go hunting all the time. It doesn't mean you go killing all the time. And it doesn't mean like I'm only successful like once or twice briefly in a year. I might get a couple deer and then I might get a bear if I'm lucky.
The following afternoon, around 4 o'clock, something sudden caught Justin's eye. Both he and his friend noticed the movement simultaneously as their truck rolled along the winding forest road. Justin instinctively turned, scanning the dense tree line, and there it was. A large, imposing figure, covered in dark, matted hair, moving with surprising speed and fluidity through the underbrush. At first, he assumed it must be a bear and even called it out to his friend. But as his gaze locked on the shape, the proportions didn't match any animal he knew. The broad shoulders, long arms, and upright bipedal posture left no doubt. What he was witnessing wasn't a bear. It was, in his words, a Bigfoot, a creature that defied all explanation.
It was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I catch some movement and we see it at the same time. We're driving and I look and I see a hairy object. I see like, I thought it was a bear. I saw an animal and I was like, I said, oh, bear. I was like, hey, and then I look and then I see what was a Bigfoot. I mean, I don't know how to describe it any other way.
It moved straight away from Justin, its massive frame slipping through the trees just a short distance ahead. The creature appeared to be stumbling or dropping low as it moved, giving him a brief, angled view, just enough to make out its broad back and towering shape. He had a clear line of sight for only a moment. Then, his friend suddenly spoke up, his voice sharp with disbelief. "Wait, there's more." Justin turned, scanning the slope beside them. From an elevated rise just off to their right, 2 smaller figures emerged, moving quickly but closely behind the larger one. They trailed the adult with an almost instinctive urgency. The larger creature, which Justin believed at the time to be a male, was enormous, easily the biggest of the group. The 2 young ones, noticeably smaller, followed it in a tight, hurried line.
Actually, it was right here, because it was on a little bit of a berm.
And was it facing you, or was it?
Yeah, so like when we see it, we saw some movement, and then like it's like right here, and all of a sudden it comes to about right here, and it like just looks like this. It doesn't have like a, but it's like this. There's, then we see it move. You see it move, and it kind of like its body language is like this, whatever this means. I don't know. To me, it looks like don't shoot.
When the cameraman asked whether he had been afraid, Justin explained that the experience was undeniably terrifying. Encountering an animal, or whatever it was, that he couldn't immediately identify shook him to his core. In that moment, his adrenaline surged, sharp and overwhelming. There was a rush of excitement, a sense of something extraordinary unfolding right in front of him. But actual fear, he admitted, wasn't the dominant emotion. It was more shock and awe than anything else.
Well, it was like a terrifying thing to see like an animal or a thing that you don't recognize. So at the moment, my adrenaline was definitely going, like real good. There was excitement. I don't know that there was fear.
After witnessing a massive adult and 2 smaller ones moving through the Sierras, what do you think Justin saw that day? A known animal behaving strangely, or a true Sasquatch family? Footage courtesy DMAX UK. Renee and Matt, the BFRO investigators, set out to meet Jenna, a young woman who had been jogging near her home when she witnessed a tall, hairy figure standing at the roadside, seemingly watching her. They wanted to examine the location firsthand and hear Jenna's account directly. As a surgical nurse, Jenna was trained to observe details carefully, making her testimony especially valuable. Now, they were heading out to determine just how reliable her sighting might be.
So now Renee and I are going out to meet Jenna. She was the young woman who was jogging near her home when she saw this big, tall, hairy thing standing on the edge of the road, apparently looking at her. I want to see this area, and I want to see how Jenna describes what happened. She's a surgical nurse. She's trained to be reliable in her perceptions. So we're going to go out there, meet her, and see whether or not we can rely on that observation.
Jenna, a Minnesota resident and now a first-hand Bigfoot witness, greeted them with a nervous but polite smile as they arrived. "This is where it happened," she said, pointing to the quiet stretch of road bordered by thick trees. She explained that she had started her run from home and followed the route for about 2 miles. Partway through, she began to feel an odd tension in the air, as though someone, or something, was watching her. When she finally looked over her shoulder, she saw it clearly. A towering, human-shaped figure covered in dark hair. It stood at the edge of the road, motionless, its posture suggesting it was focused entirely on her. The sight had frozen her in place, leaving her unsure whether to run, hide, or simply stare back.
Hey, Jenna.
Hello.
So this is where it happened, eh?
Exactly. This is where I was, at least.
Can you run us through the paces?
Yeah, so I had started out from home, and I ran 2 miles that way. It kind of felt like I was being watched. When I looked back, it was very tall. It was basically a human, but hairy, and it was just standing there, like, just watching me.
Jenna admitted she hadn't known how to react in the moment. Shock took over, and she simply kept running. She pointed to a large branch jutting out above the road, explaining that the figure had stood nearly as tall as that. Later, when she told her mother about the encounter, she tried to describe it, how it wasn't a bear, yet wasn't fully human either, but something that seemed like a mixture of both. Her mother had listened quietly before offering the only explanation that seemed to fit. Then it must have been Bigfoot.
I didn't know how to react. I was in shock, and I just kept running. It was as tall as that branch that sticks out. And I was talking to my mom. I was saying, it wasn't a bear, it wasn't a human, and it's like a mixture of the two. And she's the one who said, well, it's gotta be Bigfoot then.
The investigator decided to head down the road to get a closer look. Jenna had been adamant about using a particular branch along the tree line to estimate the creature's height. To provide a sense of scale, she volunteered to stand at the spot herself. Was it aligned with the top of the branch or the bottom? Ranai asked. At the top of that cluster, Jenna replied. Standing there, the investigator noted, I'm 6 feet tall, the branch is about 4 feet, plus another foot for my arm. She paused, calculating. So we're talking roughly 11 feet, Jenna.
Jenna was adamant that she used a particular branch along that tree line to estimate its height. So I volunteered to run down there and stand there myself to give scale.
Was it at the top of it, or was it lined up to the bottom of the branch?
It would be at the top of that cluster.
All right, guys, I'm 6 foot. The branch is 4 foot. You need to add a foot for my arm. So you're talking about 11 feet.
Matt, the investigator, trying to process what she had seen. That's a tall creature, he said. There's no way it was just a person. Definitely not a bear. He recalled that people in the area had reported unusually large figures before, so what Gina saw wasn't entirely unprecedented. Still, the image of the towering, hairy figure remained vivid in her mind. I'm certain of it, she insisted. It was a Sasquatch. There's no question in my mind.
That's a tall critter, and I would tend to think that that kind of puts it way out of the realm of it being a person. Certainly not a bear, but it's not unknown. People have seen very tall ones up here.
Well, I definitely think it was a Sasquatch. There's no question in my mind now. Definitely not.
Cliff made his way down the dusty road to meet another witness, Lorraine, whose account had stood out at the town hall meeting the night before. Lorraine, a down-to-earth farm girl, had seen something startling. A massive, hair-covered figure peering into the windows of an abandoned trailer. In this area, Sasquatches were unusually bold, sometimes appearing in daylight and even approaching homes. Cliff wanted to see exactly where Lorraine had spotted it, estimate its size, and determine the distance, hoping to separate what she had truly seen from anything that might be mistaken for something else.
Today I'm meeting with Lorraine, one of the witnesses from our town hall meeting last night. Lorraine is a down-to-earth farm girl. What she saw was a large, hair-covered figure peering into the windows of an abandoned trailer. Sasquatches in this particular area seem to be very bold. They're out during the day, and we have numerous reports of them actually peeking in windows. I want to see how big this thing was and what distance she saw it at in case there's a misidentification.
Lorraine recalled the drive toward Moose Lake, the memory still vivid. She remembered seeing a few cars parked along the roadside and then glancing over to spot it. A massive, hair-covered figure. She remembered how it had one hand pressed against the side of a window, peering inside like a curious onlooker. Then, slowly, It had turned and looked directly at her, and the image of that gaze had stayed with her ever since.
Well, I was heading to Moose Lake, and I saw these cars. Then I glanced over there, and I saw that thing. He had his hand on one side of the windows, and he would kind of look in there, like a nosy person. Then he turned, and he kind of looked this way.
Let's go over to the trailer, and I can take some measurements and try to figure out how big that guy you saw
He was big.
Well, let's go take a look.
Sure, fine.
Lorraine pointed toward the trailer as she revisited the memory. He was at that middle window, she said, indicating the spot. Right there, he was looking in from this side. His head came almost right up to that dark edge near the top. Cliff measured the height carefully. That's about 108 inches, he concluded, roughly 9 feet tall. Lorraine nodded, still astonished. I knew he was big, awfully big. And his head, she traced the size in the air, 19, maybe 20 inches from chin to crown. I've never seen anything that huge in my entire life, she uttered.
That middle window there.
So he was looking in on this side.
Yeah, he was looking right there. His head was just about right up to that black or brown ledge up there.
Wow. That was 108 inches or 9 feet tall.
God, I thought he was awful dang big.
He's awful dang big, yeah.
Big head.
Can you imagine that? 19 or 20 inches from chin to
he
the
was
top
big,
of the head.
He was huge. I never saw such a huge thing in my life.
Matt noted that these Sasquatches often looked into windows, seemingly curious about what was happening inside. He suggested that the large male Sasquatch Lorraine had seen likely had some prior positive reinforcement. Something inside a window at some point had caught its attention, encouraging the behavior to become habitual. Footage courtesy Salish Sasquatch. Sarah Brown ventured into the mist-shrouded forests of Randall, Washington, entering a realm where Bigfoot legends aren't just tales, they roam. The weekend's event buzzed with vendors, speakers, and enthusiasts, all drawn by the elusive giant. Eager to share encounters and evidence, she and her team dove in, revealing just how deeply Bigfoot is woven into the culture of the Pacific Northwest.
Welcome to Salish Sasquatch, where we share evidence as well as encounters. I am very excited to be in Randall, Washington right now. This weekend is kicking off a Bigfoot-themed event, and there's going to be a lot of vendors here and speakers, and we are going to show you what it looks like here in Washington State when it comes to the Bigfoot scene and how ingrained it is in the culture here.
The grounds buzzed with activity as preparations for the day unfolded. Speakers gathered in the main tent while vendors steadily arrived, setting the stage for the event's debut. Despite being its first year, organizers hoped for a strong turnout, with perfect weather and stunning views promising an unforgettable experience.
Everybody's setting up for today. Speakers will be over there in that tent. A bunch of vendors are starting to pile in.
A little bit more Jen's side.
Even though this is the first year of this event, we're hoping for a good turnout. It's beautiful weather and you just can't beat these views.
Pam Gwinnett, president of East Lewis County, recalled the moment vividly. She and her late husband were lounging on the upstairs deck, sinking into the oversized beanbag chairs and soaking in their first summer at the property. Then we heard it, a sound we'd never heard before, she said. We've spent our lives in the Pacific Northwest, camping, hunting, exploring the woods, but nothing ever sounded like that.
My late husband and I were sitting on our upstairs deck. We have 2 decks. We were upstairs and hanging out on the big beanbag chairs and just enjoying our first summer at our property, and we heard a sound we've not heard before. And we, born and raised in the Pacific Northwest, we've camped, and my husband would go out hunting every year and spend a lot of time in the woods. We love that.
A strange sound cut through the quiet of the ridges, immediately grabbing their attention. It wasn't an owl. We know every owl around here. And it wasn't an elk, she recalled, running through the usual suspects. Living between 2 ridges along the river, they soon heard another call from the opposite ridge. One was male, the other female, each with a distinct pitch. The sounds were unlike anything they had ever heard, leaving them both intrigued and unsettled by the mysterious encounter.
We heard a sound and we're like, huh, what was that? wasn't an owl. I mean, we know all the owls around here. Wasn't an elk. We started going down the list. It wasn't this, it wasn't that. We're like, we don't know what that was. Well, then we heard, and this is on a ridge, and we live between two ridges, okay, on the river, okay? And so we heard that sound. Well, then we heard another one on the opposite ridge, but it was female, and that was male. And there was no mistaking the male-female or the different pitch, right? But we just thought it was very, very interesting.
Unlike the stories friends had shared, rocks and pine cones mysteriously flying at them, they experienced something entirely different. The sounds that reached them were unlike anything they had ever known, strange and indescribable, leaving a lasting sense of wonder and unease.
I've heard friends say that they've experienced similar, or the rocks coming at them or the pine cones or whatever. We didn't have any of that, but the sounds were something that were undescribable as far as our life experience.
Steve, a resident of Southern Washington, attended the event for the first time. He had always been intrigued by the subject. His father used to joke during their trips into the woods, maybe we'll see Sasquatch today. Growing up with that idea in mind, he was no stranger to folklore. A couple of years ago, he witnessed something he still can't explain. In April 2023, about a quarter mile ahead on Highway 12, a figure crossed the road. Unmistakable, unlike anything he had ever seen before. Another encounter followed later, reinforcing his belief that there was more in the woods than anyone could easily explain.
I'm Steve. I'm from live in South Bend, Washington. This is the first event I've attended. I've always had some type of interest in it. Even my dad would always say we ought to go up for a trip in the woods. Maybe we'll see Sasquatch today and stuff like that. So even growing up, I was kind of exposed to the idea of it. A couple years ago, I saw something I can't explain cross Highway 12. It was in April, I think it was, at 2023. And probably about a quarter mile ahead of me, there's this figure.
Out of nowhere, a towering figure glided across the road, its single, solid color striking against the surroundings. Its arms swung naturally, but it didn't run, yet it crossed 4 lanes, the median and the shoulder, with a speed and fluidity that defied belief.
It was just this glided across the scene, one solid color, tall. You could see the arms, but it wasn't running, but it was to cross 4 lanes plus the medium and the side stuff, how fast that went across. It wasn't what I've seen most people can do at that speed. I've been up close to where, on the field of NFL players, linemen, how fast they are, but this just from a perspective, it just like this, it was across the road.
Even compared to the agility of NFL linemen up close, nothing matched the effortless, almost otherworldly pace with which it moved. Footage courtesy Animal Planet. Cliff set out on the road with a sense of curiosity, heading to meet Charles at his workplace, a man known for his relentless hunts and unbelievable stories. For 4 years, Charles had chased the same elusive tom, a turkey that always managed to slip away. But in the middle of that long chase, something far larger and far stranger crossed his path. One day, deep in the woods, Charles stumbled across a Sasquatch.
I'm on my way to meet up with Charles at his work. Charles was out turkey hunting, going after this one particular tom. He chased this bird for 4 years until one day he stumbled across a Sasquatch.
Cliff turned to Charles Benton, the well-known Oklahoma Bigfoot witness, and asked why there was so much Bigfoot stuff in the area. He said that Renee believed the merchandise might make people fake sightings. But Cliff disagreed. He thought it was the opposite. Bigfoots were already here, and that's why the stores carried Bigfoot items. People had reported many sightings for a reason. They weren't making things up, Charles said. They were describing what was already out there.
Good step here. Why do you think that is? Because Renee suggested something the other day that the Bigfoot stuff is here and that makes people hoax. I think it's the exact opposite. I think Bigfoots are here and therefore they've become part of the culture, and then you get stores like this that have Bigfoot stuff.
And there's been a lot of sightings around here too, because they're here.
Charles pointed toward the small camouflaged structure. That's my turkey blind right there, he explained. Every morning and every evening, he sat in that same spot, focused on one particular tom. For 4 years, he hunted that bird. He wanted it badly. Then one evening, everything changed. He heard a sudden noise echoing from the ravine below. When he looked down to see what caused it, he froze. A massive creature stepped into view, far bigger than anything he expected to see out there. It was huge.
There's my turkey blind right there. It's where I sat every morning, every evening. I was hunting this one particular tom. For 4 years, I hunted this bird. I wanted him bad. This one particular evening, I heard this ruckus. I looked down there in the ravine, and that's when I seen the creature.
Returning to the site for the first time, Charles felt a mixture of anticipation and nerves. Cliff suggested they try to get a clearer sense of the creature's size. He handed over a walkie-talkie and carefully guided the measurements. Keep going, to your, okay, to your right, that's perfect. Right there, stop, Charles instructed, his voice steady. They marked the spot and compared it to nearby landmarks. After checking, Cliff estimated the creature stood just over 7 feet tall, likely around 7 or 7'2", towering far above a normal human.
Well, since this is the first time you've been back, why don't we try to get a better gauge on how big this thing really was? Here's a walkie-talkie.
All right. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, to your right. That's perfect right there. That's it.
Tell me when to stop.
About right there. Okay, very good.
That's a little over 7 feet, probably right at 7 or 7'2" or something.
The encounter had changed Charles in ways nothing else could. After 4 years spent relentlessly chasing that elusive turkey, he finally let it go, stepping aside for a different kind of hunter, the master of these woods. In that moment, he realized some creatures weren't meant to be caught, they were meant to be represented.
This sighting has had such a profound effect on Charles that he has now given up his 4-year quest to bag that turkey. He has yielded it to the master hunter that lives in these woods.
With a week of investigating behind them and dozens of stories heard firsthand, the team was eager for the next step. They were on their way to pick up Bobo from his camping trip, full of anticipation. Everyone felt the area held real potential for Sasquatch activity, and the approaching break in the weather could be the perfect chance to witness something remarkable.
After nearly a week here, we've met a lot of good witnesses, and now we're gonna go pick up Bobo from his camping trip. We're all pretty confident this area could produce some Squatch action, and this coming break in the weather could be just what we need.
Bobo had been at a cemetery near an old homestead site close to Daryl and Merrill's property when he encountered signs of Sasquatch activity. At least 2 of the creatures had been nearby. One had crashed through the trees and brush, stomping roughly 80 yards away. About an hour and a half later, he caught a couple of strong whiffs of the unmistakable Squatch scent, confirming their presence.
I was at a cemetery, an old homestead site near Daryl and Merrill's up there. Actually had Squatches around. They came up, there was at least 2 of them. One ran through the trees and brush, stomped like 80 yards away. Probably about an hour and a half after that, I got a couple strong whiffs of the Squatch smell. Definitely Squatch smell.
Could the forests of Oklahoma be hiding giants that we've only just begun to notice? What would you do if you came face to face with a creature that towers over 7 feet tall? We often hear stories of Bigfoot vanishing without a trace, disappearing into the forest like a ghost. But no one ever explains how it happens. Could it be camouflage, shadow play, or is there a more advanced, almost supernatural method behind it? This next account might offer a clue. A man and his wife were out for a casual bike ride when things took an eerie turn. They began hearing strange animal noises, like a fox scream, but much deeper, more guttural. At first, he brushed it off. Not being a local, he figured it could be any kind of wildlife. But then, something caught his eye. A tall, dark figure was positioned smartly behind a tree. It wasn't just tall, it was massive. He estimated it stood 8 to 9 feet high, judging by a nearby tree where bark had been scratched off up to that same level. The creature's head lined up perfectly with that mark. When they went to investigate after it fled, the smell was overwhelming, like rotting flesh. So strong, his wife threw up. He's not claiming it was Bigfoot, But after researching the area, he discovered that sightings there are quite common. The place is Muir Woods. If there's one lesson that keeps surfacing across decades of reports, it's this. Bigfoot may not be disappearing the way we think it is. It may not be running, hiding, or fleeing at all. It may simply be standing still, letting the forest do the rest. Camouflage isn't fantasy, it's biology. From insects that mimic leaves to predators that dissolve into shadows, nature has spent millions of years perfecting the art of invisibility. If a large, intelligent primate existed alongside us, especially one adapted to dense forests and rugged terrain, blending in wouldn't be an advantage. It would be a necessity. That Colorado footage forces an uncomfortable realization. The figure only becomes visible because it moves. The moment it slows, it vanishes into color, texture, and light. No cloaking device, no trickery, just evolution doing what it does best. And that raises a far more disturbing question than whether Bigfoot exists. How often have we looked directly into the woods and dismissed what was already there? Tracks are ignored, sounds are rationalized, shapes are written off as shadows or trees. Not because they aren't real, but because our brains are wired to see patterns we recognize. If Bigfoot's greatest defense is camouflage, then the mystery isn't why we haven't captured it on camera. The mystery is how often it's already been caught, and we never knew what we were looking at. In part 1 of Encounter at the Caves, we followed local psychologist Matthew Johnson into the rugged wilderness of Oregon Caves National Monument, a region better known for tourists than terror. It was here, on a remote trail above the caves, that Johnson claims he had an encounter that would permanently alter the course of his life.
To track the animal that he and others believe descended from Gigantopithecus, a 10-foot, 1,000-pound ape that lived side by side with humans more than 100,000 years ago. After his frightening encounter with the creature on a remote trail above the caves, Johnson and his family made their way back to the caves area.
Johnson described coming face to face with a massive, upright creature, something he believed was not human and not any known animal. What made the account unusual wasn't just the location, but the witness himself. Johnson was a trained psychologist, someone accustomed to analyzing fear, perception, and stress. According to park staff, when he returned to the main cave area, near the gift shop and chateau, he was visibly shaken. A female park ranger listened as he recounted the encounter and later told fellow ranger John Roth that she believed him.
Yes, and she felt the same way that I did, that this person was not making this up. I did find what appeared to be at least one track. It was interesting in that it had a very large print, as you'd expect from his description of the classic 8-foot-tall, flat-faced, humanoid, hairy being.
Roth, a biologist and experienced ranger, met Johnson the following day and accompanied him back to the exact location of the sighting. After examining the area and listening carefully to Johnson's detailed account, Roth reached a quiet but firm conclusion. Whatever Johnson experienced had genuinely frightened him.
Roth, who was not at the caves the day of Johnson's encounter, went up to the spot where the sighting happened with Johnson the next day to look for evidence of the large animal.
I did find what appeared to be at least one track. It was interesting in that it had a very large print, as you'd expect from his description of the classic 8-foot-tall, flat-faced, humanoid, hairy being. It was longer and wider than a human boot would be, even.
That same night, Johnson submitted his report to the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization, BFRO, a group widely regarded as one of the more methodical organizations investigating Bigfoot reports. The response was immediate. Media outlets seized on the story, sending Johnson onto more than a dozen national television programs, along with radio shows and newspapers across the country. The fact that the encounter occurred at a national monument and that the witness was a psychologist kept the story alive for years, while also drawing skepticism and accusations of attention-seeking.
His findings and Johnson's manner and detail in retelling the story led Roth to one conclusion.
Well, based on the events that occurred right after the encounter, I have no question at all that he did not make this up.
The BFRO dispatched veteran investigator Derek Randalls, who had examined over 100 cases between 1990 and 2002. Randalls later stated that Johnson's encounter ranked among the most credible he had ever investigated. While he believed many reports were hoaxes, the Oregon Caves incident stood apart.
He's not your typical, I don't know, I should say this, he's not your typical person that sees Sasquatch. You gotta, when you're interviewing somebody, you gotta take a lot of things into consideration, what their occupation is, if they have anything to gain or to lose by their sighting. And in his case, I thought that it was kind of a step out, because credibility is kind of a big thing, I would imagine, in his field. And for him to come out and talk about it, I was fairly impressed. Scale of 1 to 10, I'd give him a 10. As a matter of fact, he seemed very credible.
Rather than retreat from the experience, Johnson did the opposite. He organized expeditions into the surrounding wilderness, determined to understand what he had encountered. During this time, he was joined by Bill York, a wildlife biologist and lifelong tracker originally from England. York had spent more than 3 decades in Africa tracking rare and dangerous animals, and initially approached the Bigfoot subject with skepticism.
I came up here basically as a skeptic. I don't mind telling you now, Matt. Is that okay? I came along here basically as a skeptic with some knowledge of large primates. So I'm basically looking for evidence of large primates being in the area or having been in the area. I didn't come here looking for Bigfoot. I personally only came here looking for evidence that would suggest that Bigfoot indeed exists and indeed exists in this area.
That skepticism eroded during their expeditions. On camera, York documented large footprints, including one with ridge patterns resembling the dermal ridges found on primate feet.
This is a foot cast that we took up in the mountains within a 10-mile radius of the Oregon Caves. We followed this set of tracks for a good mile. The track is about 20 inches long, which dwarfs my size 16 shoes. It is size proportionate with the kind of tracks, foot tracks we're finding out there in the mountains. My pride and joy is a juvenile track that we got up in the mountains in 2002. When you look closely at this cast, you can see the 5 toes, the padding on the toes. You can see dermal ridges.
Another track was discovered on a steep embankment, suggesting a heavy bipedal animal moving confidently through difficult terrain. York's explanations drew on decades of tracking experience, not speculation.
And you can see, if you look at it, you can see some little ridges and so on, which you would expect
like right there,
in the sole of a foot. Yeah. And it looks to me more as if they came and didn't actually sleep or anything here. They just stopped. Little rest stop. Crouched down and probably got a bit of sun or something. You can even see 1 or 2 places where it looks as if a big fat butt sat down. You'd not expect to find something like that there. Looks as if a heel pressed there because that twig is broken there. You see, so it looks like the heel went around like that. This is the outer side of the foot. Little toe around about here, big toe about here. Now my hand span like that is 10.5 inches. So that's probably a 14-inch span.
At night, the group reported hearing unearthly screams near their camps, sounds they could not attribute to any known animal.
There's nothing more thrilling than hearing it scream at you in the middle of the night in the pitch black forest, miles and miles away from any kind of help.
One such scream was later documented by a USA Today reporter who was present during an expedition. York died in 2002 without ever seeing the creature himself.
Much to my surprise, I found masses of evidence that is so equivocal, but is so typical of what you would expect of large primates in this area. Tracks, bedding areas, 1 or 2 little feeding areas, the 3 squatting areas that you mentioned earlier, Bill. So to me, it's been a terrific experience. It's removed my skepticism. But this morning, Matt and I saw some evidence which suggests that they could have even been here last night.
Still, he maintained until the end that the evidence suggested at least 2 family groups operating in the region, covering remarkable distances. Johnson, who has not had another visual encounter, says the animals were often announced by a strong foul odor when they approached camp.
The area where we had a family group with a adult male, adult female, and a young one. We've hiked up mountainsides following tracks, no trails to walk on. We climb on our hands and knees up mountainsides following tracks that go in 3-4 foot strides, like it's nothing to this animal to just walk right up the mountainside.
Skeptics continue to argue that such sightings are misidentifications or hoaxes, citing biological and ecological improbabilities. Yet for those who were there, especially seasoned professionals,
and our longest set of tracks we followed was 2 miles. Wonderful and big and strong, and we're in their home. When they've come close enough to our camps at night and I got the whiff, and it was affirmed by their growls and their screams associated with the smell. This smell is unlike any other animal out here in the forest.
The Oregon Caves encounter remains one of the most unsettling and unresolved cases on record.
I could probably hunt Bigfoot 20 times in this area, consciously looking for him and not see him. It would not shake my confidence in his existence, because I know I'd be finding evidence, like we have found evidence on this trip. And once you've seen him and you've learned enough about him, you're probably going to see him more often. You're probably going to know more about them. You're going to know their seasonal movements. You're going to know what kind of paths they walk along, what sort of places they avoid. And this accumulation of knowledge, one day you're going to say to yourself, my gosh, why did it take me so long to start seeing my first 1 or 2 Bigfoot? One day, if you're persistent enough, seeing Bigfoot will become a reasonably predictable thing. That's my personal view.
Ever wondered why capturing proof of Bigfoot has proven so difficult? Why serious expeditions demand weeks in the wilderness, hundreds of hours of footage, and equipment worthy of a military operation? Because whatever is out there isn't just avoiding us, it's outmaneuvering us. Deep in the forest, bushcraft expert Biko Wright and renowned primatologist Dr. Mireya Mayor follow a trail most people would miss entirely.
Makes you wonder if something did this.
There is something great about when you set up a campsite that animals feel comfortable enough to go through there. It's also an indicator that there is animal activity here, which is what we want.
Subtle breaks in the undergrowth, barely visible impressions pressed into damp soil. The signs suggest movement, deliberate and recent. But instead of leading deeper into the woods, the trail curves back toward their own base camp. What they find stops them cold. The tents have been tampered with, not ripped apart, not clawed or shredded. The fabric is intact, but the poles have been cleanly removed, causing the shelters to collapse in on themselves. No bear, no raccoon, no storm. The damage looks careful, intentional. I've had animals get into camps before, Biko says quietly, examining the wreckage. But pulling poles out without tearing the tent, I've never seen that. That takes awareness, precision. Dr. Mireya isn't surprised, only concerned. When animals feel comfortable enough to enter your camp, it means you're in the right place, she says. But if this creature is as intelligent and curious as we believe, it may already be watching us. The team immediately checks the perimeter, an arc of high-resolution trail cameras positioned to catch movement from every direction. It's a modern surveillance net in a primeval environment. If anything crossed into camp, one of these cameras should have captured it.
In this case, because what we are looking for could be a highly intelligent, curious animal, this is a great sign.
Let's check this side first.
When we set up base camp, we set a perimeter of trail cams around our camp. When you're trying to prove the existence of an animal, you can't leave anything to chance.
They begin reviewing the footage. Frame after frame shows nothing. No deer, no small mammals, just trees swaying gently in the wind. That absence alone is unusual.
Nothing out of the ordinary on this one. Are you seeing anything?
Nope. All appeared to be set off by wind, blowing branches.
You'd expect to see at least some deer. That's a really good game trail. All right, let's check the other ones.
Then, something subtle. A faint flicker on a distant tree trunk, almost imperceptible. Do you see that? Mireya asks, leaning closer to the screen. The clip is sent to Bryce Johnson, their technical analyst. Bryce isolates the frame, boosting contrast and shadow detail.
I can make myself pretty close to invisible when I want to, and I can move stealthy through the woods. But the fact that whatever came in evaded all our trail cams.
Let's just go ahead and send this one to Bryce and he can take a closer look at it.
I'm gonna take a look, just see what the heck is going on. Let's play this thing. Oh, what the was that? Oh, right away, there's some movement over here by this tree. Oh, that's a bat.
In the background stands a massive shape, broad shoulders, a distinct head, the unmistakable outline of something large. But its form appears unstable, almost blending with the environment, not fully solid, not fully gone. It's like it's not entirely there, Bryce says, almost transparent.
Oh, what the was that? Oh, right away, there's some movement over here by this tree. In the back, it's not much, but if I just take a simple screen grab of this, where I see those flickering lights back there, then I can pull that screen grab up and just start to mess with some of these lights and shadows. Oh my. What the is that? Oh my gosh.
When he calls Mireya, his voice is unsteady. I see a head, shoulders, a body. It's huge, but it's moving in a way the infrared camera can't fully register. Invisible, Mireya asks. Not invisible, Bryce replies. Camouflaged. There's something called motion camouflage, real documented behavior in predators. If something evolved that ability here... He doesn't finish the sentence, because the most unsettling question remains unanswered. What if Bigfoot's greatest defense isn't hiding behind trees, but the way it moves, always watching us first?
And we went down and cruised around looking at the property with a guy named Mike Johnson.
We hiked down the main hill there and we got down by the river and we kind of were following the river along. And we kind of came up on the other side and there was a bed of sand. And in the sand there were some deeper prints, if I remember.
Signs that suggested intelligence rather than random predation. On their first visit, a trail camera was set near the creek. When they returned, from hunters in the Sierras to joggers in Minnesota and researchers across the Pacific Northwest, each story reveals the same unsettling question. Something big is out there. Whether these were warnings, accidents, or brief glimpses into a hidden world, the mystery of Sasquatch only grows. If you want more encounters, evidence breakdowns, and deep dive investigations, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop your theories in the comments. And don't forget to press the bell icon. Until next time, stay curious and stay aware.